Not all bread is bad, but most people are eating the wrong kind without realizing it. Across the UK, there are a handful of bread brands quietly doing things the right way. These breads support digestion, stabilise blood sugar, keep you fuller for longer, and don't rely on shortcuts or chemical tricks. The problem is, they're often hidden in plain sight, overshadowed by louder labels and misleading marketing. So I went deep into ingredients, baking methods, and how your body responds to modern bread versus traditional bread. I'm revealing 9 UK bread brands you should start eating for your health, 3 bread brands you should avoid at all costs, and the simple signs that help you spot bad bread instantly. So, by the end, you'll know exactly which breads are worth buying and which are not. Bread 9. Biona Organic Bread. At first glance, Biona Organic Bread looks like exactly what a health-conscious shopper would reach for. It's organic, simply packaged, and positioned as a cleaner alternative to standard supermarket loaves. You'll usually find it in the organic or free-from aisle, where people are actively trying to make better food choices, and, in many cases, they are. Biona doesn't aim for the ultra-soft texture or unnaturally long shelf life that defines most mass-produced bread. It avoids flashy claims and focuses instead on ingredient quality. That alone makes it a noticeable step up from the majority of breads sold in the UK. What really sets Biona apart is what it leaves out. There are no artificial preservatives, no unnecessary emulsifiers, and no chemical dough conditioners designed to force speed, volume, or uniformity. The bread relies on organic flours, seeds, and straightforward recipes that your body can process more easily. Organic standards also limit many of the shortcuts used in conventional bread production, which quietly makes a big difference over time. That said, not every Biona loaf offers the same health benefits. Some of their breads are naturally fermented or made with sprouted grains, which can improve digestion and mineral absorption. Others use standard yeast fermentation. While still cleaner than mainstream bread, these don't deliver the full advantages associated with traditional sourdough or long fermentation. This is why Biona works best as a transition bread. It helps you move away from ultra-processed loaves without overwhelming your routine or your taste buds. Health-wise, Biona offers clear benefits. Fewer hidden additives, reduced pesticide exposure through organic sourcing, and better satiety. Many people feel fuller for longer and experience fewer energy crashes compared to eating refined white bread. But it's important to be clear about one thing. Biona represents the starting point of healthy bread, not the peak. Once you experience what better fermentation and simpler methods can do, you'll realize there's another level entirely. And that's exactly where the next bread on this list comes in. Bread 8. Jason's Sourdough. Jason's Sourdough has quietly become one of the most important breads in UK supermarkets, especially for people who want the benefits of sourdough without having to visit an artisan bakery. At a glance, it still looks like an everyday loaf, sliced, packaged, and easy to grab, which is exactly why many people underestimate it. What draws people to Jason's is trust. The brand is upfront about its process, and unlike many breads labeled sourdough, this one actually earns the name. It's made using a slow fermentation method rather than relying on shortcuts or artificial souring agents. That alone puts it in a completely different category from most supermarket bread. The fermentation process is where the real difference happens. Long fermentation allows natural bacteria to break down complex carbohydrates and gluten structures before you even eat the bread. This makes it significantly easier to digest and reduces the sharp blood sugar spikes associated with fast-made bread. For many people, this is the first loaf they can eat regularly without feeling bloated or sluggish afterwards. Jason's also keeps the ingredient list refreshingly short. You're not consuming emulsifiers, preservatives, or chemical improvers designed to manipulate texture and shelf life. Instead, the bread relies on time, something modern bread making has almost entirely removed from the equation. From a health perspective, this has real effects. Slower fermentation supports better gut comfort, steadier energy levels, and improved satiety. You feel satisfied without needing to overeat, and your body isn't fighting against ingredients it doesn't recognize as food. What makes Jason's especially valuable is accessibility. It's widely available, relatively affordable, and doesn't require a dramatic change in habits. For many people, this is the first real sourdough they've ever eaten, and once they notice the difference, it's hard to go back. That said, this still isn't the top tier of bread on this list. There are brands that take fermentation even further and strip things back even more, and the next one does exactly that, in a way most supermarket breads never will. Bread 7. Waitrose, Duchy Organic. Bread Waitrose Duchy organic bread is often chosen by people who already care about food quality but may not fully realize why this bread feels different from most others. It sits quietly on the shelf without bold health claims or trendy buzzwords. Yet it represents a meaningful upgrade from conventional supermarket loaves. The first advantage comes from organic standards. Duchy organic breads are produced under stricter rules that limit additives, processing aids, and pesticide exposure. That immediately removes many of the hidden ingredients commonly found in cheaper bread, the ones added to improve softness, speed up production, or extend shelf life at the expense of nutrition. What also sets this bread apart is how it respects structure. Instead of aggressively refining flour to create a uniform, fluffy texture, Duchy organic loaves tend to retain more of the grain's natural character. This means more fiber, a slower digestive response, and a steadier release of energy throughout the day. For many people, this shows up in subtle but important ways. You stay fuller for longer, you're less likely to experience mid-morning energy crashes, and your digestion feels calmer compared to eating highly refined bread on a daily basis. Another overlooked benefit is consistency. Duchy organic bread isn't trying to mimic artisan sourdough or compete with bakery loaves. It's designed to be reliable, clean, and familiar, which makes it easier to stick with long-term. For families especially, this matters. It's a bread that works for everyday meals without relying on artificial enhancements. That said, this bread still operates within the supermarket model. While it avoids many of the worst shortcuts, it doesn't always use long fermentation or traditional methods that unlock the full potential of grain. Now that you've seen what better supermarket bread looks like, it's important to look at the opposite, because some of the most familiar loaves are doing the most damage. Bread 1 to avoid: Hovis soft white and standard sliced loaves. This is where familiarity becomes the problem. Hovis is one of the most recognizable bread brands in the UK, and for decades it's been treated as a household staple. But most of its standard soft white and brown sliced loaves are built on speed, not health. These breads are highly processed to achieve extreme softness and long shelf life. To make that possible, the dough is heavily manipulated using emulsifiers, preservatives, and dough improvers that have nothing to do with traditional bread making. The result is a loaf that looks comforting but behaves very differently in the body. Digestion is fast and aggressive. Blood sugar spikes quickly, followed by an energy crash that leaves you hungry again soon after. This is why many people feel the need to snack shortly after eating sandwiches made from this type of bread. There's also very little natural structure left in the grain. Fiber is minimal, fermentation is rushed, and flavor is artificially maintained rather than developed. Over time, this kind of bread contributes to bloating, poor satiety, and unstable energy, especially when eaten daily. The issue here isn't brand loyalty, it's a formulatio. These loaves are engineered for convenience and consistency, not nourishment. And once you understand how aggressively processed bread affects your body, the difference with properly fermented sourdough becomes impossible to ignore. Bread 6. M&S Collection Sourdough. M&S Collection sourdough is where many people first realize that not all supermarket bread is created equal. On the surface, it still feels familiar, neatly packaged, consistent, and easy to buy. But what's happening behind the scenes is noticeably different from standard loaves. What M&S gets right here is fermentation. Unlike most breads that are rushed from mixer to oven in a matter of hours, this sourdough is given time. That slower process allows natural fermentation to do what it's supposed to do: break down complex carbohydrates, soften gluten structures, and make nutrients more available to your body. The result is a bread that feels lighter after you eat it. Many people notice less bloating, less heaviness, and a more stable level of energy compared to conventional bread. That's not marketing. It's the biological difference between rushed bread and fermented bread. Ingredient-wise, this loaf is also far cleaner than the average supermarket option. You won't find the usual lineup of emulsifiers and dough improvers designed to manipulate texture and shelf life. Instead, the bread relies on traditional methods to create flavor and structure rather than chemical shortcuts. Another reason this bread stands out is taste. Proper fermentation develops depth and complexity naturally, without added sugars or flavor enhancers. That fuller flavor often leads to a subtle but important change in how people eat. Fewer slices, slower meals, and greater satisfaction. However, it's important to keep perspective. While this sourdough is a strong option within a supermarket setting, it still operates at scale. Fermentation times are improved, but not always as long or as traditional as smaller bakeries would use. Still, as a widely available, reliable sourdough, this is a major step up for anyone trying to improve their diet without completely changing where they shop. And just wait until you hear about the next bread, because it takes traditional methods even more seriously, and the difference shows. Bread 5. Gail's Bakery. Sourdough. Gail's Bakery sourdough is often associated with craftsmanship, but its real value goes far beyond the artisanal image. This is a bread rooted in traditional baking methods that prioritize time, simplicity, and flavor, all of which directly affect how your body responds to what you eat. Unlike mass-produced loaves, Gail's sourdough is built around long fermentation. This process allows natural bacteria to break down starches and gluten gradually, making the bread easier to digest and more nutritionally accessible. It's one of the reasons many people who struggle with standard bread find they can tolerate this much better. The ingredient list is refreshingly short. No unnecessary additives, no artificial enhancers, and no chemical preservatives. The bread relies on flour, water, salt, and time, which may sound basic, but that simplicity is exactly what modern bread has lost. When nothing is added to force speed or softness, your body isn't left dealing with ingredients it doesn't recognize. From a health standpoint, this shows up in real, everyday ways. You feel fuller with less. Energy levels stay more stable, and digestion feels noticeably calmer compared to eating rushed, highly refined bread. Many people also find they naturally slow down when eating bread like this, not because they're trying to be disciplined, but because the bread is more satisfying. Quick pause here. If this breakdown is helping you rethink the bread you buy, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps more people find this information, and it lets me keep making deep dives like this one. Now, while Gail's sourdough sets a strong standard, it's still part of a growing bakery chain. That means some processes are adapted for consistency and scale. Even with traditional methods, there are limits when bread is produced for widespread distribution. That's why the next bread on this list is such a turning point. It strips things back even further, focuses almost obsessively on fundamentals, and proves just how powerful truly simple bread can be. Before we continue, there's another category of bread that needs to be called out, because it's often confused with healthier options. Bread 2 to avoid. M&S standard white and brown sliced bread. This is where branding can be misleading. Marks & Spencer does sell some genuinely good sourdoughs, but its standard white and brown sliced loaves fall into the same trap as most mass-produced bread. Despite the premium image, these breads are still made using fast fermentation, refined flour, and texture-enhancing additives. The softness is engineered, not earned through time or fermentation. From a health perspective, the effect is familiar: rapid digestion, quick blood sugar spikes, and poor satiety. You eat more, feel satisfied for less time, and often experience that heavy, sluggish feeling afterwards. The key issue is contrast. When you compare these loaves directly with M&S sourdoughs, the difference in digestion and fullness becomes obvious. One works with your body, the other works against it. This is why ingredient labels matter more than brand names. A trusted retailer doesn't automatically mean a healthy loaf, and that contrast brings us back to breads that prioritize structure, fermentation, and simplicity. Bread 4. Biona rye bread. Biona rye bread is very different from the soft, fluffy loaves most people are used to, and that's exactly why it earns a place this high on the list. Rye bread doesn't try to mimic white bread. Instead, it works with the grain as it naturally is, and that has powerful effects on how your body processes it. The first thing people notice is density. Rye bread is heavier, darker, and more filling. This isn't a flaw. It's a sign that the grain hasn't been overly refined or stripped of its structure. Rye is naturally higher in fiber and digests more slowly, which means your blood sugar rises gradually instead of spiking and crashing. Biona's rye bread also benefits from cleaner ingredients and organic sourcing. There are no artificial preservatives or unnecessary additives hiding in the background. What you're eating is closer to real, traditional bread than most supermarket options, and your gut responds accordingly. From a health perspective, rye offers advantages that wheat-based breads often don't. It supports longer-lasting satiety, helps regulate appetite, and can reduce the urge to snack between meals. Many people also report better digestive comfort, particularly when switching from highly refined wheat bread. There's also a behavioral shift that happens with rye. Because it's more filling and flavorful, you naturally eat less of it. A slice or two feels substantial, which changes how bread fits into your meals. It becomes a supporting food rather than the main filler. That said, rye isn't for everyone at first. The texture and flavor are more robust, and it can take time to adjust if you're used to very soft bread. But for people focused on metabolic health, appetite control, and long-term energy, it's one of the most underrated choices available. And the next bread takes this philosophy even further. Fewer ingredients, more time, and a level of simplicity that exposes just how overcomplicated modern bread has become. Bread 3. Bertinet Bakery Sourdough. Bertinet Bakery Sourdough is a clear example of how powerful bread can be when nothing unnecessary gets in the way. This bread doesn't rely on health claims, clever packaging, or marketing language. Instead, it focuses on fundamentals. And that simplicity is exactly what makes it stand out. At its core, this sourdough is made from flour, water, salt, and thyme. No additives, no preservatives, and no shortcuts designed to speed things up. The fermentation process is long and deliberate, allowing natural bacteria to do the work that modern bread making often tries to replace with chemistry. This approach has real effects on digestion. Long fermentation helps break down gluten and starches before the bread ever reaches your plate. For many people, that translates into less bloating, less heaviness, and a more comfortable gut after eating. It's one of the reasons traditionally made sourdough has remained a staple for centuries. Nutritionally, this bread behaves differently too. The slower breakdown of carbohydrates leads to steadier blood sugar responses and longer-lasting energy. Instead of feeling hungry again shortly after eating, you stay satisfied, focused, and fueled for longer periods of time. There's also a noticeable difference in how people eat this bread. Because the flavor is deeper and more complex, you tend to eat it more mindfully. Meals slow down, portions shrink naturally. Bread becomes something you enjoy, not something you mindlessly consume. Bertinet Bakery's approach also highlights an uncomfortable truth about modern bread. When you strip away the additives and speed, bread doesn't need fixing. It doesn't need enhancers. It just needs time. This level of care is rare at scale, and that's why the next two breads on this list are so significant. They take traditional baking seriously, but apply it in ways that change how bread fits into everyday life. And the next one in particular surprises people, because it proves that consistency and tradition don't have to be opposites. Bread 2. Hobbs House Bakery. Hobbs House Bakery represents a rare middle ground between tradition and accessibility. This is bread made with methods that haven't been rushed out of existence, yet it's still available to people who don't live next door to an artisan bakery. What defines Hobbs House is its commitment to long fermentation and minimal ingredients. Time is treated as a core ingredient, not an inconvenience. That allows natural processes to improve digestibility, flavor, and nutritional quality in a way fast-made bread simply can't replicate. The result is bread that feels satisfying without being heavy. Many people notice better gut comfort, fewer energy crashes, and a sense of fullness that lasts. This isn't because the bread is lighter, but because it's more complete. Nothing has been stripped away or artificially enhanced. Another strength of Hobbs House bread is consistency. While small bakeries can vary day to day, Hobbs House manages to preserve traditional methods while delivering reliable quality. That makes it easier to choose good bread regularly, not just as an occasional treat. There's also a subtle mindset shift that happens when eating bread like this. You stop chasing softness and volume. You start valuing flavor, texture, and how food makes you feel afterwards. Bread becomes part of a balanced meal rather than a processed filler. Still, even at this level, there's one more step you can take. One option that removes scale entirely, avoids additives altogether, and puts craftsmanship above convenience. Before we get to the healthiest bread option overall, there's one more type of bread that deserves a clear warning. Bread 3 to avoid. Industrial supermarket bakery bread. These are the loaves baked in store at supermarkets and presented as fresh, traditional bread. The smell, the crust, and the presentation suggest quality, but the reality is very different. Most supermarket bakery bread arrives as pre-made dough, frozen or partially baked off-site. It's designed for speed and uniformity, not fermentation or nutrition. Additives and processing aids are often used behind the scenes, even when they don't appear obvious to the consumer. Because these breads are rarely fermented properly, they digest quickly and offer little lasting satiety. They look rustic, but behave like ultra-processed bread once eaten. This is one of the most deceptive categories of bread because it feels like a healthy choice. But without time, fermentation, and simplicity, freshness alone doesn't mean quality. And once you've seen how misleading freshly baked can be, the value of truly real bread becomes crystal clear. Bread 1. independent real bread bakeries. The healthiest bread option in the UK isn't always found in a supermarket aisle. It's found in independent bakeries that follow the principles of real bread. These are bakers who rely on flour, water, salt, and time, and nothing else. No additives, no processing aids, no shortcuts hidden behind labels. What makes real bread different is intention. It's made slowly, often by hand, using long fermentation that allows natural bacteria to fully transform the dough. This process improves digestibility, enhances flavor, and changes how your body responds to bread on a fundamental level. For many people, this is the first time bread actually feels good to eat. Less bloating, more stable energy, better satiety. Bread stops feeling like a problem food and starts feeling like real nourishment again. Independent bakers also tend to work with better quality flour and traditional techniques that preserve the grain's natural structure. Nothing is added to force softness or extend shelf life. The bread is eaten fresh, as it's meant to be, not engineered to last weeks. There's also a deeper benefit here. Choosing real bread reconnects you with food made by people, not factories. It shifts bread from a background product to something intentional and valued. And that alone changes how much and how often you eat it. If there's one takeaway from this list, it's this. Healthy bread isn't about branding or trends. It's about time, simplicity, and respect for the process. Once you make that shift, everything else becomes easier. Your digestion, your energy, and your relationship with food. Once you know what to look for, bad bread becomes very easy to spot. How to spot bread you must avoid. First, check the ingredient list. Real bread should have just a few ingredients. If you see emulsifiers, preservatives, dough improvers, or long chemical names, that bread is designed for shelf life, not your digestion. Next, feel the texture. Bread that stays extremely soft for days is usually heavily processed. Natural bread firms up over time. That's normal. Then, notice how you feel after eating it. If you're hungry again quickly, bloated or sluggish, the bread is digesting too fast and spiking your blood sugar. Finally, don't trust labels like artisan, freshly baked, or sourdough style. Unless the bread is slow fermented and has a short ingredient list, those words don't mean much. If the bread was made quickly, it will digest quickly, and that's usually the problem. Bread isn't the enemy. Badly made bread is. The healthier options you've seen today all share the same basics. Fewer ingredients, better fermentation, and respect for the process. The breads to avoid do the opposite. They rely on speed, softness, and shortcuts. You don't need to overhaul your diet. Just choosing better bread, even once or twice a week, can improve digestion, energy, and how full you feel. If this video helped, tell me in the comments which bread you're switching to, or which one you're cutting out. Share this with someone who still thinks all bread is the same. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more simple, honest food breakdowns.